version of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which was passed in 1993 by the federal legislature. What this bill does is it prohibits any government action from substantially burdening an individual's right to exercise their religion. Government may only burden an individual's right to free exercise of religion if it is in furtherance of a compelling government interest and is the least restrictive means. This applies to all existing and future laws, whether statutory or otherwise, of the state and its subdivisions. It is effective upon enactment. I guess I'd like to just read a little bit, just one phrase here from President Clinton when he signed this into law in 1993. He described this as saying, what this law basically says is that the government should be held to a very high level of proof before it interferes with someone's free exercise of religion. This judgment is shared by the people of the United States as well as by the Congress. We believe strongly that we can never be too vigilant in this work. Anyone who would like to speak, there is a icon down at the bottom. If you roll over I think it's the share screen thing, and it'll pop up and you can raise your hand. So that's how I will identify people. I would like to be able to go at least roughly for and against equally. I may not get everybody in order, 1 for, 1 against, 1 for, 1 against, but if I get more than one ahead on one side or the other, I'll try and get that evened up as quickly as I can. So I would like to start out by recognizing, what's this about? Oh, so I'm sorry, Senator Kelsey, would you like to have some opening comments?
Just very briefly, thank you, Senator, and welcome to all the Iowans who are here today to speak on the bill. We appreciate your time and your attention to this issue. As Senator Guth was mentioning, it's his 4th time running this bill, which is kind of indicative of its internal problems within his caucus, I think. But mainly what I want to emphasize is that just because there's a national law that Bill Clinton passed doesn't mean that I support it, doesn't mean that some of the folks on this call support it. So I'm just waiting to hear what everyone has to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kelsey. And just for those that weren't on here when I was talking to the senator before we opened, Senator Schultz is still in committee right now. He will be here as soon as he can be and is familiar with this bill himself really well as a co-sponsor. So I would like to start out our comments today with Brad Cranston. Brad, would you address us, please? Just a minute. You're muted yet, Brad. Does he have one? There we go.
There we go.
There we go.
All right. Brad Cranston, founder of Iowa Baptist for Biblical Values. And as a pastor for 28 years in Iowa, I rise in support of this legislation. Religious liberty has stood as the cornerstone of our nation, going all the way back to its founding by the Pilgrims in 1620. And in that same sacred tradition enshrined in the First Amendment, every Iowan should be free to worship and live according to their sincerely held beliefs. No one should be forced to conduct their lives or their livelihood in such a way that their own conscience is violated every time they walk into their school, their business, or their place of employment. And in that rare event, when the heavy hand of government feels it is necessary to demand compliance at all costs, then that same government should be required to prove that it has a compelling interest to make such a demand and that it is doing so in the least restrictive way. That is all this legislation does. It does not pick winners and losers. It just gives a person their day in court. As it stands today in Iowa, if you experience something similar to what happened to the Ode Guards in 2013, then there is no day in court. Dick and Betty were faced with a difficult situation of having 2 men walk into their family-owned wedding business and demand its use and their personal services for a wedding ceremony that was contrary to their Christian beliefs. In the end, after months of being harassed by threats and hate-filled phone calls, they paid the men $5,000 and closed the business in which they had invested their hearts and lives. To make the matter even more egregious, it was later discovered that the men were married before they ever showed up at the Gort's house. It was all a setup to destroy the lives and livelihoods of two of the kindest, most considerate, most loving people you could ever have the privilege of meeting. Which brings us to the point that the opponents of this bill will tell you that its advocates are intolerant, hate-filled bigots. That is a lie, intended to silence the opposition and generate emotionally charged but factually unfounded support. From the Ode Guards to Senator Dennis Guth, the lead sponsor of the bill, to the vast majority of Christians in this state who espouse a biblical worldview of marriage and sexuality, love and kindness are the order of the day, even towards those with whom they have strong disagreements. You will likely also hear today that passing this bill would come at great cost to Iowa's economy. That too is false. The 21 states that currently provide protections for religious liberty have fared just as well, if not better, than their sometimes intolerant neighbors. As evidence of the ridiculousness of that claim in the first place, I cite testimony that was presented at last year's subcommittee hearing on this same bill. An opponent testified that because RFRA was being considered in Iowa, her company, which focused on recruiting highly skilled workers to come to Iowa from Silicon Valley, was instead sending them to Chicago to find jobs. After the subcommittee, I asked her if she was aware that Illinois has the very same religious freedom law already on the books. I can only assume from her response that she was very well aware, but was evidently hoping that the rest of us were not. She was not happy that I called her bluff, and that's the point. The ultimatums about leaving the state that you will likely hear today from the big corporations that care absolutely nothing about the values of the Dick and Betty Odegaards of the world are nothing but empty threats. Adopting this legislation is the first step towards protecting Iowans from the soft totalitarianism of the left. I encourage you to take that step and help ensure that Iowa is once again a place where every citizen can not only worship, but live and work according to the dictates of their own conscience without fear. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Pastor. I think I forgot to mention that we are going to try and limit this to 3 minutes each. And so that was a little over 3 minutes, 3.5 or so. So I'll certainly let somebody on the other side go for a little extra, one person. But Keenan Crow, would you like to go next?
Yes, thank you, senators, for allowing me the time to speak. Keenan Crow with One Iowa. We represent LGBTQ Iowans, and we are opposed to the bill. We're going to hear today, over and over again, how this law won't do what we think it will do. Proponents are going to claim that it won't harm public safety, won't allow discrimination, and won't encourage people to file frivolous lawsuits. But someone I believe most conservatives respect, the late Justice Scalia, said exactly the opposite in his analysis of such policies. In talking about the standards set forth today, Justice Scalia said the following, quote, "The rule respondents favor would open the prospect of required religious exemptions from civic obligations of almost every conceivable kind, ranging from compulsory military service to the payment of taxes to health and safety regulations such as manslaughter and child neglect laws, compulsory vaccination laws, drug laws, and traffic laws, to social welfare legislation such as minimum wage laws, child labor laws, animal cruelty laws, environmental protection laws, and laws providing for equality of opportunity for the races," end quote. Scalia then went on to offer examples of suits that he had seen in those exact areas where the outcome would be changed if such a standard were adopted. If someone with the stature of Justice Scalia was telling us that this would allow discrimination and would harm public safety, I think it bears taking him seriously on those claims. We know what happens when these laws are passed. We know the kinds of suits we see filed, and we know that it encourages bad actors to test the limits of these provisions. For instance, in Indiana, shortly after their RFRA was passed, King Park Tang was charged with criminal child abuse. Tang's lawyer claimed that RFRA allowed her to commit that abuse, saying that she believed that if she didn't discipline her child with a rod, that he would end up in hell. The child had 36 bruises on his back, arm, and head. Regardless of the legal outcome, the horror that that child endured can't be reversed. I don't want that to happen to any Iowa children, and I certainly don't want to pass laws that would encourage such behavior when someone has a misguided belief that the religion allows them, like Justice Scalia warned, to opt out of laws involving child abuse. We also know that in some cases, people have actually succeeded in thwarting law enforcement, even when they are endangering children. For instance, Perez v. Paragon Contractors, a federal judge in Utah held that RFRA meant that a leader of a religious sect did not have to testify in a case investigating child exploitation and abuse of child labor laws. The child exploitation case alleges that the leaders of a religious sect in Utah closed local schools and required children to pick pecans at a private ranch using heavy equipment such as chainsaws and harvesters. When called to testify, the sect's leader, Vernon Steed, refused, saying that he objected to discussing matters internal to the Fundamentalist Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The judge held that, in light of RFRA, the religious objection by the sect's leader prevented the court from compelling his testimony. These and many additional claims that impact public safety are going to be at issue if this proposal advances. It will open the floodgates to legal chaos and encourage bad actors to engage in harmful behavior while using their beliefs as a legal shield. We ask you to reject this legislation for the good of our children, our safety, and our economy. Thank you.
Thank you, Keenan. Let's move on here to, I think I'd like to go to AJ Potter. Are you on there, AJ?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, AJ.
All right. Well, thank you for allowing us to make some public comment on this RFRA bill. We appreciate Senator Guth and Senator Schultz for sponsoring and co-sponsoring this. My name is AJ Potter. I'm a pastor in Pleasantville, Iowa, with Pleasantville Baptist Church, and I'm in support of this RFRA. And I believe that it's important for our state to have this. A lot of people on the other side, similar to what we just heard, are going to say that this is a bill that would allow people like us, people of faith, people that have closely held moral and conscience beliefs, to use it against those that we don't like, or against those that we're supposedly opposed to. And I just want to mention that this is more, and I appreciate this about this bill, that this is more of a protection for myself as a pastor, or the Christian businessmen of my church, to have some sort of protection. We know that in the state of Iowa, we have multiple further definitions of the Second Amendment, and how we have the federal Second Amendment, but we don't have in Iowa, we have further clarifications of what that means for Iowans. We do have a federal RFRA, but in Iowa, we don't have what the further definitions of what it means for us. And I don't want to have the businessmen of my church or myself that have some beliefs to be silenced just because somebody else disagrees with us. We do need to have our say in court. We need to have our day in court, so to speak. We need to have some venue, some avenue for us to live out our beliefs rather than just be silenced. And the speaker prior to us mentioned, and they love to take bad cases or extreme cases and think that everybody's going to do that same thing. I don't believe that's even close to remotely reality here in Iowa. But the bill does say if the government has some belief that if this is going too far, the government does step in and say, no, that's not what we're going to do here. And so I would encourage the passage of this RFRA. I believe it's something that would be helpful to our state, and it's something that I personally believe is good for our states. And this doesn't just protect Christians; this is protecting people of all faiths, and appreciate that, and would encourage you to pass this.
Thank you, Pastor. And I'm trying to look at names up here, and they're all bouncing around so much, it's hard for me to see who ought to go next. Let's see. How about Scott Sundstrom? Scott, would you like to speak? Hello, Scott, are you there?
Hi, good afternoon. Sorry.
Yes.
Yep, I am now unmuted. Thanks for the opportunity. Scott Sons from Walmart Blue Cross Blue Shield. We've registered in opposition to the bill. Certainly appreciate that expression of religious faith is one of the core values in our country. We also think, as a company, one of the core values of our company is inclusion and diversity, and we do have concern that this bill would allow for discrimination in the state that is in conflict with our core values as a company, and also could potentially be a detriment to recruiting workforce. We have a large and diverse workforce, and we have a lot of highly specialized positions where we need to recruit from across the country. We think this legislation sends the wrong message and can hurt us as a business and hurt the communities in which we serve. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Scott. I think at this time I'd like to go to, let's see, how about Lance Kinzer?
Thank you very much, Senator Guth. This is Lance Kinzer, First Amendment Partnership, and appreciate the opportunity to talk briefly about this bill. We are in support, and unfortunately, it seems like the very term RFRA in recent years almost denotes political controversy in and of itself, and we just think that's really unfortunate for a variety of reasons, and particularly don't think it needs to be controversial in Iowa. Two main reasons. Number one, because Iowa has a great judicial system with judges who can be trusted to apply the RFRA standard fairly. And number two, because Iowa has a strong underlying civil rights law that already adjudicates many of the issues that those who are concerned about RFRAs think may cause problems down the line. And what I think we've seen 30 years of history since Justice Scalia's opinion in Smith is that candidly, as much as I respect Justice Scalia, and I certainly do, he was simply wrong. His concern that the strict scrutiny standard was unworkable has not proven to be the case either at the federal level, where a RFRA was quickly passed on a bipartisan basis, or in the many states that have passed state RFRAs or have their own court systems have adopted essentially the strict scrutiny standard of RFRA without a statutory basis. Really just being transparent, I think the real concern most folks have who oppose the bill is that somehow RFRA is going to be a disaster for LGBT rights. That's really not the lesson that's been taught by the facts on the ground. Indeed, states like Connecticut and Illinois that have had RFRAs on the books since the 1990s consistently rank among the best states for LGBT individuals as determined by organizations like the Human Rights Campaign. Really the most common use of RFRA, indeed the very reason for which RFRA was first created, is to protect religious minorities. And RFRA in no way, even in those cases, acts as some sort of legal trump card under which religious interests always prevail over other interests. Indeed, far from it. The RFRA standard merely says, as it's been stated before, that government must have a very good reason to limit free exercise and should use reasonable alternatives to limiting free exercise when possible. Under this standard, sometimes those seeking to vindicate a religious interest win, and sometimes they lose. There's no reason not to trust Iowa courts to apply this common sense standard in a fair and equitable manner. In Iowa, many of the hypotheticals that folks who oppose RFRAs are concerned about would never be decided under the RFRA standard, even were SF 436 to pass. And the Iowa Civil Rights Act provides numerous specific exemptions for accommodation of religious belief and practice, even in circumstances that would otherwise impact a protected class in areas of employment, housing, and public accommodation. In those instances where we're
10 seconds, Lance.
Institution, educational facility, association, corporation, or society, those exemptions would apply before the RFRA standard would ever apply. Where those exemptions don't apply, again, all RFRA would do is ensure that the state restrictions on free exercise only happen in cases where there's a compelling government interest that can't be vindicated through a less punitive limitation on religious exercise. I'll just close by saying what we know from 30 years of RFRAs at the federal and state level is that they are most used to protect Native American religious practice, Sikhs, Muslims, Buddhists, and those who are engaged in kind of social service activities that I think all of us would generally support. I could run through a laundry list of those, but I've probably used up most, if not all, of my time at this stage. So I just want
We're a little over,
thank-
Lance.
Yep. All right. Well, then I'll just be quiet. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lance. Appreciate it. How about Laura Hesper? I didn't get all your last name because it doesn't all fit up on the screen. Laura, would you like to speak?
Yes, thank you. I'm Laura Hesberg with the Iowa Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and we urge you to reject this legislation. We strongly support religious freedom, one of our nation's fundamental values protected by the First Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. We also support American values of equality and fairness, as well as laws to protect against discrimination and ensure fair treatment for all. We oppose this bill because we believe it is unnecessary and could become a vehicle for enabling discrimination and for harming or restricting the freedom of others. Iowa's civil rights laws strike the right balance. They provide extensive protection for religious freedom. This exemption proposal would undermine our laws by allowing people to claim religious beliefs, give them the right to decide which laws they would follow. And as others have mentioned, this means it would enable people to ignore laws protecting health, safety, and essential civil rights. And that's bad for everyone. But it disproportionately impacts the most marginalized. Relationship violence does not discriminate. It's a public health crisis that occurs regardless of gender, race, economic, immigration, or education status. But young women, LGBTQ women, and women in communities of color experience the highest prevalence. Domestic violence involves coercive and controlling behavior. An abusive partner seizes every opportunity to leverage oppression and use inequality as a weapon to control another person. Religious exemption laws undermine safety for victims of violence by making it easier for those who harm to engage in coercive behavior. Consider an abusive partner who challenges his arrest for domestic abuse because his religious tenets say that a man has the right to discipline his wife. Quite frankly, not too long ago, this was not a religious belief, but a societal norm. Domestic violence is a leading cause of homelessness for women and children. Iowa enacted housing protections in 2016. This proposal could allow landlords to claim a religious conflict to justify the eviction of single women, divorced parents, same-sex couples. Or what happens if abusive partner's religious belief conflict with Iowa's no-fault divorce law? What if an abusive partner doesn't want a divorce, but the victim wants to leave? Iowa doesn't need this. History is replete with examples of religion being used to justify discrimination and violence based on race, gender, and sexual orientation. Please reject this proposal. Religion should not be used to hurt people or restrict their freedom. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. You covered a lot of territory there very quickly. I think I'd like to go to Chuck Hurley. Are you on there, Chuck?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thanks so much, Senator Guth and Schultz, for bringing this bill in an effort to try to level the playing field and also, frankly, to stand up to some people who I think are trying to intimidate you. We've heard over the last 4 years when you've brought this bill that companies will want to move out of state. There was an egregious example that Brad Cranston mentioned where one company threatened to flee to Illinois if the Senate and House passed this bill, when in fact Illinois already has a RFRA. And I think it's just so specious to say that companies won't do business in a state that passes RFRA when they're doing phenomenal business in many states that have RFRA. They're doing business in the United States of America, which has RFRA. So I just appreciate you guys being willing to speak the truth in love and to stand up to, frankly, what in many cases is bullying and intimidation. I've tried to figure out what's going on here. I'm no psychologist, but it just seems like maybe some people have been hurt in past decades. Now that they sort of have the high ground, they want to hurt other people. You know, the golden rule is to treat others the way you want to be treated, not the tarnished rule, which is treat others as bad or worse as you were once treated. So I just hope that we can reduce the temperature we can coexist in love and respect, and we can simply restore the beauty, the dignity, the power of the First Amendment to what it was designed to do. And that is to actually let people believe and act on their most deeply cherished understanding, their core conscience, their core beliefs, without government coming in and crushing that and penalizing them like the Old Guards, putting them out of business. So, Senator, God bless you. I know that you're doing this out of the right heart and out of the right logic. And I just applaud you for it, encourage you to keep on keeping on. Let's try to have a truly fair court system when it comes to people of conscience being bullied by their government and being told they can't do or believe what they really believe. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Chuck. My staffer here just reminded me that each time I get somebody up here, I'd like it if you would identify which group you were with and if you're registered for or on the bill, if you're registered for or against on the bill itself. So I'd like to go on to, how about Joe Murphy?
Thank you, Senator. Thanks for the opportunity to speak with you all today. My name is Joe Murphy and I represent the Iowa Business Council, and we are opposed to this bill. The Iowa Business Council is a business association made up of some of Iowa's largest companies. Altogether, our members employ more than 172,000 Iowans and have a combined Iowa payroll of more than $10 billion. For the last 5 years, we've been coming to you and sharing stories and information relating to Iowa's workforce problem. Simply put, in order for our businesses and any business to expand in our state and create new high-paying opportunities for Iowans, there needs to be population growth in Iowa. It's really that simple. You know, according to our data that we've recently released just last month, Iowa's 5-year population growth trajectory is only 1.1%. That anemic population trend is the biggest impediment in growing our state's economy. And while we've seen tremendous legislative action aimed at solving this problem in years past, such as the Future Ready Iowa initiative, we've also seen legislation that harms our ability to attract and retain and hire the best and brightest. And respectfully, Senators, this bill today falls into the latter category. We need to be doing everything we can to promote Iowa as a welcoming and inclusive place for all individuals. Our economic future quite literally depends on that. And so for those reasons, we are registered against the bill, and thank you for your time.
Thank you, Joe. Let's see where we at here. Josh Kent, are you on?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Hey, this is Assistant Pastor Josh Kent, First Baptist Church here in Des Moines. I stand in favor of this bill. Senator Goof, thank you for all your work. Listening to all of the businesses speak, I worked in the secular world for many years, and I will tell you, not one question ever came across in my interview that said, "What church do you attend? What faith do you believe? What faith do you practice?" And for that reason, I don't understand where they think that money will be leaving the state or not coming to the state. I know it's a for or against, but is it possible for these companies to submit their questionnaires to you of how they approach the RFRA to their employees in the state of Iowa? I look at this that every race, religion, and creed has the right and the freedom and liberty of a free nation built upon the founding fathers that say that we have the ability to practice and worship how we see fit. Now, we all know that just because someone might preach something behind a pulpit or a bar that says there's a right way and a wrong way to live, that has nothing to do with workforce development. That has nothing to do with an Iowa council, one Iowa. I just would like the freedom that they're trying to take away. We talk about being free people. We talk about having liberty, but you cannot have liberty by squashing another voice by saying, what if, we believe, not filled with facts. It's, I'm afraid of what would happen. I don't know what you're afraid of. If you like to speak your mind and you like to have the First Amendment, then you would like to have a Religious Freedom Restoration Act. If you want to be muzzled and silenced, of course you would be against it. But I've not seen our money drying up here in the state of Iowa because we want to have religious freedom. I see that a world that is dying without Christ is what's drying up the state and what's drying up our country. And so we should have the freedom to stand behind a pulpit in a service and say, thus saith the Lord, and not fear what might be said. Again, I've worked in the secular world for many years, and never one time was I asked, what religion are you? Where did you go to college? What's your stake or what's your belief on such and such? It's, can you work here? Can you do a good job? And I don't put my nose in one Iowa's business or other business of Iowa council, and they shouldn't put their nose in our business either. That's what I have to say today. Thank you very much. I do stand with you in this.
Thank you very much. I'd like to go to Amy Friedrich.
Thanks very much. I appreciate the time today. Can you guys hear me fine?
Yes, can hear you well.
Great. Thanks so much. Again, Amy Frederick. I'm the president of U.S. Insurance Solutions for Principal Financial Group. I'm also a native Iowan. I was born and raised here just outside of Van Meter, Iowa. So I keep track closely to the things that happen in the state of Iowa. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak today. And I am speaking for Principal who's registered opposed to Senate File 436. And we'd like to discuss just a little bit of our rationale. As we've communicated before, diversity and inclusion are core business issues for Principal, so much so that they have equal footing for us on tax and regulatory issues. In 2006, Principal advocated for legislation to expand Iowa's Civil Rights Act to include gender identity and sexual orientation as protected classes, in addition to race, sex, age, national origin, creed, religion, and disability status, and it was signed into law on our campus. Iowa's Civil Rights Act assists Principal in recruiting and retaining a diverse and creative workforce from across the country and the world. Senate File 436 would enable discrimination. It would empower Iowa business owners to deny services or accommodations based on a potential customer's sexual orientation or gender identity. While termed religious freedom, we believe that such discrimination in any context is contrary to the state's values, and it sends the wrong message about Iowa. This bill would weaken the Iowa Civil Rights Act. We have witnessed attempts in other states, and they've been noted here in this discussion today, to legalize discrimination in the name of religious freedom. And such attempts in other states, Indiana, North Carolina, Georgia, Alabama, were met with clear and unequivocal resistance from the business community, not only because of the employer's commitment to diversity and inclusion, but also because of the potential economic impact. We're proud to be joined in our opposition of this legislation by the business community here in Iowa, and we're proud of Iowa values. We ask respectfully that you not move Senate File 436 out of subcommittee, and thank you again for the opportunity to have this discussion.
Thank you, Amy.
Thanks.
Let's go to Matt Sharp. Matt, are you on here today?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Hello, Matt.
So I'm Matt Sharp. I'm senior counsel with Alliance Defending Freedom, the nation's largest legal advocacy organization dedicated to defending religious freedom, and we speak in support of this bill. For many people of faith, every aspect of their life has eternal consequences. The Muslim believes it's a deep dishonor to the Prophet Muhammad to shave his beard. The Jewish baker forced to open on Saturdays would openly defy the Torah's command to remember it as a day of rest. The Catholic nun mandated to pay for abortion-inducing drugs would trample underfoot the sanctity of human life. And the grandmother florist, told she must design the floral arrangement for a good friend's same-sex wedding, would offend a sacred institution established by God. We may not share all of these beliefs, but the real test of liberty is what happens when we disagree. Disagreement is not discrimination, and it should never be treated as such. Nor should disagreement provide a justification to shut the doors of the justice system to minority beliefs simply because the winds of societal acceptance have shifted directions. Because one day the winds could change again, and it could be your or my religious practices facing government scorn and restriction. Senate File 436 doesn't determine winners or losers, nor does it mean that religion will always prevail. In fact, there was a recent study that Professor Lucian Duge, who is at the law professor at Georgia Tech, and he did a comprehensive study of every federal case that's been filed under the federal RFRA to see actually how these laws have been used. And what he found is that largely religion does not win. In fact, it was only about 16 to 17% of the cases that the religious claimant prevailed. And what that shows us is that courts are able to dismiss the frivolous claims. They're able to dismiss where the government does not where the government burden is not a substantial burden, or where the government has a compelling interest that overrides the free exercise claims. But what's important is even for those 80% of people that lost, they had a day in court. They had the opportunity to go before a judge and to make their case. And I think that's ultimately what Senate File 436 does. It's providing a process by which people can go to court, make their claim, and see if the government's interest outweighs the desire for individual freedom, the free exercise of religion. It's simply a process for people to have their day in court. And that process helps to safeguard values that every one of us holds dear. Values like diversity, like human dignity, freedom for all, and the conviction that no person should suffer discrimination at the hands of government for publicly living out their faith. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Let's go to Jeremy Diss.
Thank you, Senator Guth, members of the subcommittee. My name is Jeremy Dice, and I'm special counsel to First Liberty Institute, a nationwide legal organization dedicated to defending and restoring the religious liberty of all Americans. Our firm represents people from all faith traditions, Native Americans included, and also the Falun Gong. When the government attempted to ban the development of an Islamic cemetery, for instance, we fought and won for the local Muslim community. Religious liberty is an unqualified guarantee recognized by the First Amendment to the United States Constitution. Government should never be permitted to burden a person's exercise of religion without providing the most compelling of justifications. SF 436 makes that assurance clear and extends a meaningful guardian to the religious liberty of all Iowans. When, on November 16, 1993, President Bill Clinton signed into law the federal version of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, he noted this, quote, "Our founders cared a lot about religion, and one of the reasons they worked so hard to get the First Amendment into the Bill of Rights at the head of the class is that they well understood what could happen to this country, how both religion and government could be perverted if there were not some space created and some protections provided," unquote. Though Americans share differing views on family, faith, and conscience, Americans are united in offering mutual respect for one another as we pursue tolerance within our pluralistic, multicultural society. As I've alluded, First Liberty used the Texas Religious Freedom Restoration Act, the Texas corollary of what you are considering today, in order to prevent the city of Farmersville from banning the creation of an Islamic cemetery in their community. First Liberty likewise used the Texas RFRA to defend and prevail on behalf of Congregation Toras Chaim, an Orthodox Jewish synagogue near Dallas, when local authorities created obstacles to the use of a local home for the synagogue's meetings. Texas adopted its state version of the Religious Freedom Restoration Act in 1999. For more than 2 decades since, Texas has continued as one of the world's largest economies, played host to hundreds of conventions drawing millions to the state annually, and is the home to the headquarters of international businesses like ExxonMobil, State Farm Insurance, Toyota, 7-Eleven, AT&T, and Dell, just to name a very few. Had either of these events, though, occurred in the state of Iowa, the Jewish and Muslim communities would have little recourse against otherwise neutral laws of general applicability that burden their free exercise of religion. You hold in your hands the opportunity to make very clear to your constituents that you are determined to secure the promise of religious liberty that the founders of this country and Iowa made to its citizens. With SF 436, you guarantee no outcome. Rather, you afford your citizens a day in court when the state burdens their religious beliefs. Asking the state to move cautiously and compellingly is a small price to pay when religious liberty is at stake. As the Supreme Court of the United States said in West Virginia versus Barnett, quote, if there is any fixed star in our constitutional constellation, it is that no official, high or petty, can prescribe what shall be orthodox in politics, nationalism, religion, or other matters of opinion, or force citizens to confess by word or act their faith therein, unquote. SF 436 would provide a meaningful guardian to the religious liberty of Iowans should their government stray from its constitutional obligations. Thank you.
Thank you. And that was 2 in favor. I'm going to try and go at least 2 on the other side here. Let's go to Brian Waller. And want to make sure that you would be opposed to this.
We are, yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of the Technology Association of Iowa. My name is Brian Waller, and we are opposed to Senate File 436. The Technology Association of Iowa is a statewide member-based organization uniting Iowa's technology community. TAI advances Iowa's reputation as a technology state by connecting leaders, driving public policy, fostering diversity and inclusion, and developing talent. Technology is weaved into the culture and fabric of every single Iowa company and community. Across the state, companies leverage and create technology to power agriculture, finance, insurance, healthcare, education, manufacturing, transportation, telecommunications, and more. Iowa employs over 92,000 Iowans in the tech field, and there are currently over 30,000 tech jobs open right now in the state of Iowa. The technology industry is the economic engine of Iowa. TAI is committed to ensuring that diverse individuals, communities, and organizations feel welcome and are included in the Iowa technology community. In the technology industry, we are in a global war for talent. Our membership knows that diversity increases the bottom line for Iowa companies. Diverse teams lead more and better innovation and improve financial performance. We're trying to develop global technology solutions, and you need teams to come together from all walks of life to create those technology solutions. That's why we feel strongly, and having Iowa become a place that's known for intolerance is very dangerous for the Iowa technology industry. We can't afford to give Iowans reasons to feel unwelcome. We need those who are being recruited to Iowa companies from out of state to see the great state of Iowa for what it is, a place of inclusion and a place of opportunity. It goes without saying that diverse technology workforce is critical to the long-term success of Iowa's technology industry, and everyone deserves equitable opportunities to participate in the innovation economy. We hear on a daily basis from member companies starving for a workforce of diverse talent with none in sight. It is bills such as this that prohibit the workforce pool from expanding to its full potential, and that's why the Technology Association of Iowa is opposed to Senate File 436. Thank you, Senator, for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you, Brian. Hey, one question for you, Brian. You mentioned better performance when you have diversity in your company. Could you send me a little data that would support that?
Absolutely. If you're creating technology solutions, you certainly don't want 3 people that sit around and think alike. You want people to come from different walks of life to create technology solutions.
Okay.
I'd be happy to send that to you, Senator.
Okay, thank you, Brian. One another on the opposed side, I believe Jim Carney would be opposed. Is that correct? That'd be Jennifer. Jim, you look a lot. You don't look like, or Jennifer, you don't look very much like Jennifer today. You look.
We don't look like one another, do we? Thank you, Senator. I'll be very, very brief because I'd just like to introduce to you Michaela Wilson and Tiffany Brendeland, who are 2 Meredith employees, a company that I know you're familiar with and has been here in Iowa since 1902. And we think represents kind of what the state of Iowa is about. So Michaela or Tiffany, you can take over, all right? And thank you, Dennis.
You're welcome. Hello? I've got to unmute Michaela Wilson. Right there on top. Yep, there you go.
Thank you.
Gotcha.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Mr. Senator. My name is Michaela Wilson. I'm here on behalf of Meredith Corporation, as Jim said, with my colleague Tiffany Brendelin. At Meredith, I'm a revenue operations analyst and co-chair of the LGBTQ+ employee resource group. Tiffany is assistant manager in audience targeting and the Asian American ERG co-chair. We are here to speak against Senate File 436 on behalf of Meredith for our nearly 1,000 employees in Iowa and approximately 5,000 employees nationwide. We all agree that freedom of religion is important and we want that to be protected. However, we feel this is the wrong implementation of that. Freedom of religion is already protected by the First Amendment, and this proposed law is unnecessarily extremely broad and ripe for abuse. Passage of this law would give people or businesses an excuse to discriminate against certain groups. For example, a healthcare provider could refuse to treat an unmarried pregnant woman. A landlord could refuse to rent an apartment to an unmarried couple, or an employer could refuse to allow medical leave for a gay or lesbian employee to take care of a seriously ill spouse. These are all examples of basic human rights violations and not in line with our values or our corporate culture. We are also concerned that passage of a bill that promotes intolerance would limit our ability to attract the talent we need for our high quality and desirable jobs. To draw quality workers that all of Iowa's businesses need, we need to be known as a progressive state that celebrates and embraces all people. Meredith's average salary of a full-time employee in Iowa is nearly $90,000, and our annual payroll is more than $70 million. As this indicates, we provide high-paying quality jobs and benefits and are proud to be an exemplary community citizen. We have a very robust diversity, equity, and inclusion program, and we are proud of our many programs that celebrate all of our employees, no matter their race, culture, background, gender identity, or sexual preference. Examples include 7 employee resource groups that are conduits of workplace culture by educating Meredith staff on the value of diversity and celebrating customs, characteristics, and the traditions of various employee communities. Our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Director, with the help of the DEI Council, which brings together senior leadership and employees, drive programs to increase the diversity of our staff by recruiting and retaining diverse employees. Our DEI staff works with our content creators and our national and local media groups to increase representation and ensure the individuals in our content mirror the makeup of our increasingly diverse society. We have always been proud of our Midwest roots, and we staunchly defend our home state when critics tell us we should move our headquarters to New York or LA, where most of our advertisers are based. We love that our editors and creative teams live the lives of our readers, but that means we must live the lives of all of our readers, even those who are LGBTQ+ or may practice a different religion, but still deserve to live without discrimination of any form. Passing this bill would chip away at our Iowa pride, and we don't want to be put in a position of explaining to current employees, job candidates, customers, and vendors why we are based in a state that allows the type of discriminatory behavior permitted in this bill. We ask that you please do not pass Senate File 436. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you. Let's go on then. Tom Chapman, would you like to speak? Okay, you unmute Tom.
Thank you, Senators, and thanks for that conversation today, everybody. My name's Tom Chapman. I'm with the Iowa Catholic Conference, and we support the bill. Much has been said, so I'll just say a couple things. I think we need to be clear, absolutely clear about what the bill does and doesn't do. I don't think it allows anybody really to do anything. It doesn't grant any new rights. It simply gives persons an argument in court about the actions of government. It's a boundary on government. So we believe that respect for religion helps ensure respect for all of our other freedoms as well. So thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Tom. Let's go to Connie Ryan.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I'm Connie Ryan, Executive Director and Lobbyist for Interfaith Alliance of Iowa and Action Fund, and we are strongly opposed to Senate File 436. Here we are again, debating a bill that would create a clear path to enable and justify discrimination in Iowa. The bill would sanction by law the right for someone to legally discriminate against another person utilizing their sincerely held personal religious beliefs as justification. The state of Iowa will be giving permission to restaurant and shop owners venue managers, landlords, employers, and more to pick and choose who gets to walk across the threshold of their business, retain their services, rent an apartment, and of course, sit at their lunch counter. A business owner or employee could choose to discriminate against you because you are gay, transgender, female, Jewish, Muslim, atheist, Catholic, Black, or Latinx. Iowans could discriminate against you because their religion tells them that you are not worthy and because the law would give them the authority to do so. You have heard today that religion, specifically Christianity, is under attack and the state must protect religious freedom. That is a false narrative designed to scare people and move a political agenda forward. I am grateful that our nation prioritizes religious freedom as one of the rights we must protect. However, as with all rights, religious freedom is not without limits. Religious freedom does not guarantee anyone the right to infringe on the rights and freedoms of another person. The agenda of permitting religion to be misused as a license to discriminate will harm Iowans. Iowans who live in communities across our state, rural and urban. Iowans who are our friends, family, and neighbors. Iowans who simply want to work, live, and provide for their families, free from harassment and discrimination by others. Religion has been used historically as a weapon to discriminate against the LGBTQ+ community, women, immigrants from many countries, communities of color, and people from other religious traditions. This legislation will take Iowa backwards. It will send us into a future that is neither good for the state nor Iowans. A future that embraces discrimination is not the Iowa we want, not for business, not for our communities, and certainly not for our children. Interfaith Alliance of Iowa Action Fund urges you to reject discrimination justified by religion and reject Senate File 436. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Connie. I believe we have time for one more for and one more against. I would like to call on Kelly Shackelford. If he's still here. Maybe he's not on here any longer. Was here a little earlier. How about if we go to Danny Carroll?
Thank you, Senator. If you can hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you fine.
Just one note, Jeremy Dice was actually in place of Kelly Shackelford. Okay. Thank you. My name is Danny Carroll. I work with the Family Leader. We're registered in support of Senate File 436. Religious freedom. It has been an important issue in this country since the Europeans first landed in New England. People instinctively want to be able to practice their sincerely held religious beliefs without fear of unreasonable interference from any level of government. In our pluralistic society, it is inevitable that the public good and religious expression will come into conflict. That is not the question before this legislature. The question is, how do we manage that conflict when it does happen, not if it happens? And the time to plan for that conflict is now. As far as I know, there are no current conflicts that would involve a RFRA action. That's good. The time is perfect to protect religious expression precisely when it is not needed. Let's plan ahead so we're ready when the protection is required. Some here today will tell you that Iowa will have a hard time attracting competent and qualified employees to our state if you pass this Religious Freedom Restoration Act. This position is almost always supported by anecdotal stories with little or no data or research. It's difficult to believe that someone would not want to live in a state that protects religious expression. Seriously, would you have Iowans believe that if it seems necessary to restrict religious freedom, that requiring the government to demonstrate a compelling interest and impose a least restrictive remedy is a deal breaker in attracting prospective employees? I just don't buy it. it doesn't pass the Main Street test. Nobody I know would reasonably conclude that a prospective employee is going to look at Iowa and say, no way would I work there. They protect religious freedom and expression, and I would prefer to not work in that kind of an environment. It just simply does not make sense. What does make sense is that certain business executives have a personal political view, and they're trying to force that on Iowa by opposing this bill. Please ignore their ploy and move forward with Senate File 436. Thank you for your time and for giving me the chance to be here.
Thank you, Danny. And then lastly, Dustin Miller, would you be registered opposed?
Yes, sir, Senator. Thanks for calling on me.
You bet.
And also be speaking on behalf of Andrea Woodard, just in the interest of time, also representing the Greater Des Moines Partnership. But I serve as the Executive Director of the Iowa Chamber Alliance, and we are registered opposed to this legislation. And I want to be brief. I know that we're coming up on a full hour here, but Iowa is covered by Mr. Murphy with the Iowa Business Council is in a population crisis. It is difficult to do economic development unequivocally in a state where some of our larger population centers, Chicago, Minnesota, have more people in their metropolitan areas than in our entire state. We are very concerned about the population crisis, which will take all hands on deck in a variety of different fashions. That includes creating a welcoming environment for a broad diversity of people across the country that would want to be welcomed here in the state. Clearly, there's a different perspective between the proponents and the opponents. Certainly, there is a perception versus reality on both sides perceived on the other. I can tell you unequivocally in the states that this has occurred in the recent past, there is a direct impact on tourism. There are contracts involved across various different business and tourism entities that if these things get passed, business is lost. And I will say one of the things that is a little disheartening in this discussion as we go throughout the years is the dismissiveness of the concerns of the opponents. I don't think it's fair to assume that anyone who is opposed to this legislation doesn't have closely held religious beliefs themselves. In some of the comments early on, especially, seem to espouse that. We just think that the current laws seem sufficient under the First Amendment at both the federal and the state level to address these concerns. So with that, we represent over 15,000 members of the largest chambers across the state and would like to register that we would not like to see this bill move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Dustin. I appreciate those comments and would certainly be willing to speak with you further on that if you would like to do that. We are out of time. Senator Scelsi, do you have any closing remarks that you would like to make?
Yes, thank you, Senator. First of all, there were 3 entities, people on the call that were not registered lobbyists. For sure, one of them was Iowa Baptist for Biblical Values. So if folks are coming to speak on behalf of an organization, that's one thing. But if they're there as a person, not as representing the organization, they need to be upfront about that. If someone was listening to this subcommittee, they might think that, all Baptists are against this bill, and I don't think that might be true. So we need to give everyone on the call, on the Zoom call today, a fair impression of who is speaking and who they're representing. So that's one thing.
Yeah, I apologize for that. I should have made that announcement at the beginning to identify what group.
Absolutely. And I realize not everyone gets on a Zoom call every day, so it's probably not, top of mind, but just want to make note of that. Dustin, your comments about, people's personal beliefs are so true. That's really doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about today. Folks of all different beliefs can have different opposing viewpoints on this particular issue. So that was very pertinent, I thought, to this discussion. And we can't dismiss, this really smacked me between the eyes as I was listening to our friends from the business lobby today. We have a serious workforce problem in this state, and it's nothing to be lightly dismissed. And, when we're trying to recruit people from out of state, these things do matter. And it's a serious problem. We're not going to be able to grow our state, and that's bad for everybody. So those are my comments right now, and thank you, Senator Guth.
Thank you, Senator Scelsi. Well, since Senator Schultz has not made it here from his committee meeting yet, I would just like to close this meeting by saying, I think the problem today is not that religion is being forced on others. Now, today we have a battle with the idea that man can change any law of nature to suit himself, and that is being forced on people who believe that the laws of nature are constant. In this world of division and change from one extreme to another, which we've certainly seen on the national scene, we need an anchor. For thousands of years, that anchor has been personal faith. We have the opportunity today to protect and preserve that part of each of us known as a conscience, that part of our soul that only we ourselves fully know. When we lose the idea that each of us has an inalienable right that cannot be violated by the laws of man, we lose our humanity. We are no longer protected by principles that endure from one political system to another, but we become subject to the whim of those in power, destined to be pawns in their control. Ultimately, none of us wants to be told what to think. RFRA provides a wall that protects the inner soul of man from invasion by those who wish to take control of more than just our actions, but even our thoughts. If we want to remain truly autonomous human beings, we must protect the right to live and work according to our own beliefs. Today, we have the opportunity to do just that. I will be signing and recommending passage. Senator Scelsi, what would you like to do?
I'm not signing, Senator, and I hope Senator Schultz gets a chance to watch this hour-long Zoom call before he signs off as well.
Okay, I'll be sure and see if we can make that happen. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
This meeting is called to a conclusion. Thank you, everyone, for participating.